All right. Welcome everybody to the 11th annual Research Computing Facilitators Virtual Residency Workshop. It is Monday, June 23rd, 2025, and this is the first session of the workshop. This is an overview of the workshop series and this year's workshop. Okay, so here's the workshop webpage. Here's the workshop email address. If you email that, it'll auto forward to me, and I'm happy to work with you. Make sure, please, to mute yourself and turn off your camera when you're not talking. And I'm happy to take questions by voice. I'm happy to take questions in the chat. However you want to do it. Don't send questions live by email because I probably won't see them. I don't have my email pulled up. Audio, video details, you can do it on the phone if you want. And today, all of today's slides are already posted. You're welcome to participate from outside the USA, and we've had, I think, 20 other countries participate. So it's not toll-free, but it's a local call, I believe. When you're on, camera off, mic muted. Here's an outline. I'm gonna have to breeze through all of this stuff because usually we have an hour and a quarter. This year we only have an hour because of a separate constraint that I've got. This is an experiment, so you guys are the 11th cohort of this national program. Please don't be shy about asking questions. I love questions. I'm way more fun and interesting if you're asking questions than if I'm just droning on and on. You're the only ones who can make the virtual residency a success, so the only dumb question is the one you didn't ask. Volunteer your ideas, volunteer your experiences, your accumulated wisdom. It's you who's in charge, not us. Okay, so let's dive right in. What's a cyber infrastructure facilitator? Well, first, what's cyber infrastructure? It kind of depends who you ask. If you ask a network engineer, cyber infrastructure is the network. If you ask a supercomputing person, cyber infrastructure is the network and the supercomputer. If you ask a cybersecurity person, they'll tell you cyber infrastructure is everything that needs cybersecurity. And if you ask anybody else, cyber infrastructure is whatever their thing is, plus the network and the supercomputer. Then what's a cyber infrastructure facilitator or a research computing facilitator? Maron Livni of University of Wisconsin-Madison coined this term back in, I think, 2012 or thereabouts. The Advanced Cyber Infrastructure Research and Education Facilitator. We've really taken that down to just cyber infrastructure facilitator. They work with researchers and educators to help them improve their research or education productivity and make their aspirations bigger by using cyber infrastructure. One of the questions I love asking researchers is, suppose that I could offer you an infinitely large, infinitely fast computer to do your research. What research would you do if you had that as opposed to what you have today? And it's not that we'd ever be able to offer that. It's that we want them to think about what the end goal is, not what they can currently accomplish, because what they can currently accomplish is a way station. The end goal is what really matters. Typically, an individual facilitator is going to have responsibility for a whole institution, perhaps even multiple institutions. It is a very large portfolio. Happily, you are not digging as deep with each individual researcher or research team, but research computing CI facilitators have probably the broadest notion of the institution's research portfolio of anybody outside of the VP for research, and maybe some of their staff. Now, at some institutions, this is a part-time gig. At others, it's full-time. It really depends on the size of the research portfolio at that institution. And these folks come from a lot of backgrounds. We come from a lot of backgrounds. Faculty, current or former, postdocs, current or former, research staff, like research scientists, research programmers, current or former, IT professionals, including enterprise IT, current or former. In fact, one of the most common ways that a CI facilitator and, in fact, a CI leader is chosen at a non-PhD granting institution, is the CIO goes, okay, Janet, you're in charge of research computing. And suddenly Janet, who's been in enterprise IT her entire career, has an entirely new area that she has to address, usually with minimal preparation. And then students, graduate, undergraduate, current or former, at that institution. Now, um, we talk about the five facings. This is the world of cyber infrastructure professionals more broadly. These are sort of the five roles, the five areas of responsibility that research computing professionals have. Researcher facing, like a facilitator, and that's not the only one, but that's an example. System facing, like a supercomputer system administrator or a network engineer, particularly a research network engineer. Data facing, like a research data librarian. Software facing, like a research software engineer, someone who develops software for research. And then strategy and policy facing, typically an institutional cyber infrastructure leader. So that last one, the job is begging for money. And in fact, when we get done here, I'm going to go to a meeting where my usual task, I will be begging for money. As always, it's pretty much all I do for a living. So what is a facilitator not? A facilitator is not necessarily a computer scientist. In fact, the overwhelming majority of CI facilitators, at least that I'm aware of, come from non-CS disciplines, come from everything except CS. I'm my native discipline, my PhD is in computer science, but that makes me the freak, not the other way around. A CI facilitator is not necessarily a sysadmin. If it's a one-person research computing shop, then yes, they're probably the sysadmin and the facilitator and so on and so forth. They do everything, a little bit of everything. But at most institutions, there's multiple people in these roles, and the facilitator is not typically going to have a system-facing role, or at least not a large one. A CI facilitator is not necessarily a researcher, current or former. They might be, many are, but certainly not all of them. Again, a good fraction of them come from the enterprise IT side, where they've had, up to that point in their career, typically a relatively modest amount of exposure to research. They're not necessarily an IT professional. Now, again, some of them come from the enterprise side of IT, but a lot don't. A lot of them are former researchers, former faculty, former research scientists, and so on, postdocs, what have you. And so they may have had no exposure to the IT profession. And they're not necessarily an enterprise IT professional in particular. Again, some are, many are not. So you can't just sort of point a finger and say, okay, that group of people are facilitators. No, it is much more messy, complicated, and fun than it would be if they were all sort of the same. All right, well, what do facilitators do? They work with STEM and non-STEM researchers, scholars, and creatives to advance the computing or data-intensive aspects of their research or scholarship or creative activity. And by the way, from here on out, I'm not going to bother to say that long phrase. I'm just going to say research, but I really mean research, scholarship, and creative activity. Okay, so several years ago, as we were writing a grant proposal about this, we actually sat down and worked out, by no means a comprehensive list, but a significant list of the sorts of tasks that CI facilitators do. Adapting research workflows to cyber infrastructure systems like supercomputers and clouds and large-scale storage, and teaching users how to use these systems. Bridging between the researchers and the technology experts. So, for example, helping researchers have conversations with system-facing professionals like sysadmins and network engineers. Anticipating new cyber infrastructure needs for emerging research activities. So I think a lot of us are dealing with the need for GPUs for machine learning, and that grows and grows and grows, essentially unbounded. Helping the researchers who have limited coding experience design use case specific software and port it to advanced and large scale architectures. teaching cybersecurity and compliance like HIPAA for grant proposals and controlled unclassified information and things of this nature. And now the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, in the federal government has released a draft standard for high performance computing security. So this is becoming increasingly important. Um, we develop strategies for specific use cases. So you don't just produce general use stuff. You drill down a bit with some of the individual projects to see what is it they need. Teaching data management. If researchers had their way, all of their data would live on a collection of USB hard drives in a cardboard box. And if they were very diligent, each of those USB drives would have a dyno label that had like one or two words to describe what was on that one. Um, the federal research funding agencies, the state agencies, the foundations, private companies are not accepting those sorts of strategies. In fact, if they really had their druthers, it would be on one drive inside the PC under the desk of a grad student. This is not acceptable anymore by any of the funders. So we have to help them with something more sophisticated than that. Providing local and national training opportunities. So local is easy, like running workshop. Well, easy, straightforward to describe, like running workshops and so on. National training opportunities, like hooking people up with software carpentry or the virtual residency or things of that nature. Helping researchers evaluate technology solutions. So what's the right server or graphics card or what have you for the particular thing a specific research team is trying to do. How much RAM do they need? How many cores do they need? And so on. Recruiting new users and new use cases, it's a constant thing. Advocating to central administration on behalf of researchers. Preparing the cyber infrastructure focused aspects of papers, posters, what have you, and composing cyber infrastructure related text for grant proposals. And again, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but it took two screenfuls just to get through this subset. So you can, and this is a very broad range of activities. So you can tell this is a very broad facing kind of profession that really requires an awareness and a lot of a sort of ever-growing skill set, a stack of skills to be able to provide the capabilities that the researchers at your institution need. So years and years and years ago, a colleague and I, James Cuff, we came up with a diagram to kind of show what sort of things should a facilitator be interested in. So we kind of put two axes. One axis, the vertical axis, people and things. Do you like people or do you like things, right? If you love things, you're probably better off being system facing. If you love people, you want to be people facing. On the other axis, you have research versus technology. So being a researcher versus being an IT professional. And if you're sort of into technology and you generally prefer things over people, you should be like a sysadmin. If you prefer things over people but you like research, you should be a researcher. If you prefer people over things and you like research more than technology, you should be an educator. If you like technology more than research and people more than things, you should be at the service desk. But right smack dab in the middle is where you should be if you want to be a facilitator. You need to love both research and technology. You need to love both people and things. Now, you don't have to be literally in the middle, but you've got to love all of it, the whole spectrum in both directions. All right, so who cares about facilitators? Why would we bother even to have facilitators? Well, researchers find us incredibly helpful, and the national leadership finds us incredibly helpful. So there was a conference called the National Cyber Infrastructure Coordination Service Conference, and their report said, let's get more of this sort of thing happening. Likewise, the National Science Foundation, they had a report called Cyber Infrastructure 2030, and they went on and on about how this stuff is very, very important. So has this been growing as a profession? The answer is yes. Now, I stopped counting in 2019. And the reason I stopped counting in 2019 is because now the labor cost of figuring out how many of us there are is so high I just can't afford the time anymore. But way, way back in the distant mists of 2019, we had seen exponential growth, both in the number of people who were part of the Campus Champions, the virtual residency, or the CARC researcher facing group. Those three mailing lists, we merged them together, threw out the duplicates, and came up with 1,254 people. In that profession and 409 institutions. Those numbers are wildly out of date now. It's much, much higher now. So it's at least a couple of thousand. Okay. So I'm going to skip over this in the interest of time. This is some background, some historical stuff about how we got here, but we really honestly don't have time to spend on it. So I'm going to move on and sort of pitch why we're doing what we're doing. Why is it that enterprise IT's approach to training won't work for research computing professionals in general and research computing facilitators, cyber infrastructure facilitators in particular? Um, so one of the issues, maybe the biggest issue, is the issue of scale. Um, Enterprise IT, we've grown from about 500,000 in 1970 to about 4.5 million 11 years ago. You got to figure that number is probably heading toward, it's got to be 8 or 9 million by now. It's presumably a huge number. The compound annual growth rate during that period was over 5%. So it was doubling every 13 years. So at that scale and with that kind of growth, you've got degree programs, you've got certificates, you've got degrees at every level from associates to PhD. You've got professional development certifications. You've got huge resources devoted to constantly updating enterprise IT skills. And this doesn't even take into account the explosion of data science degree programs. The last time I checked, and it's possible it's changed more recently, but the last time I checked, the only two states that did not have a data science degree program were Alaska and Wyoming. Um, that may be different for one or the other or both of them by now. Research computing, on the other hand, as we saw, is at most a few thousand professionals, maybe several thousand. It's not huge numbers. There's no degree programs and really no hope of there being degree programs. No certifications. We're working on that for informal education. Minimal resources available for updating your skills. And so your best bet is going to be informal education like this. All right, so the virtual residency, what is it? Well, our goal is we teach pre-service and in-service CI facilitators how to do CI facilitation or how to do it better. We also have a hidden secret agenda, which I'll get to. How do we do this? The number one way is this. We do a week-long workshop every summer. We've been doing this since 2015, so this is our 11th annual. The University of California system ran a couple of them in the late 2010s. We have regular calls. We have an annual meeting at the SC Supercomputing Conference. And we've run a bunch of apprenticeships as well on grant proposal writing, on paper writing, and on running a grant. Before the virtual residency, no one had ever been dumb enough to try and teach this. Now it seems normal to try and teach this. Now, why are we doing this? So, CI facilitators, we tend to come in with strong experience in our own discipline, which again, typically is not computer science. It was in my case, but it usually isn't. Most facilitators, and in fact, most CI professionals in general, haven't been faculty, although some have. I myself, a piece of my position is faculty. Sometimes we come in with little or no research experience, especially if we're IT staff who have an enterprise IT background. But even if we do have a lot of research experience, that doesn't mean we have any experience with research outside our own discipline. When we started this 11 years ago, 10 years ago, there weren't any programs, not local, not regional, not national, on teaching people how to be a facilitator. And when I started, way, way back in the distant mists of the early 2000s, nobody knew what my job was supposed to be. And because they didn't know, they didn't have an expectation of what kind of capability I would deliver. So they were just glad if I showed up. And I had the luxury of 5 years to figure out what the heck my job was. Well, those days are long gone. There's no luxury of figuring out what your job is. If you get hired, you're expected to be productive the moment you show up. You're expected to hit the ground running. So we need to help people get there so that they can be productive. So who are we talking about? Well, so far we've served 1,759 people from 523 institutions in every U.S. state and 4 U.S. territories, including every EPSCoR jurisdiction, plus 20 other countries on every continent except Antarctica. And honestly, I despair of Antarctica because first of all, nobody is native to Antarctica, as far as I'm aware, no human being. And their home country is presumably who they would be associated with. That includes more than a quarter, between halfway between a quarter and a third of our participants are from non-PhD granting institutions. Just under a quarter of our institutions are from EPSCoR, the Established Program for the Stimulation of Competitive Research. So these are states and territories in the US that receive less than 0.75% of federal research funding dollars. There are 28 of us, so about half the states and territories are EPSCoR, and about a quarter of the participating institutions are in EPSCoR jurisdictions. 286 institutions are campus champion institutions. So that's about 4/5 of all campus champion institutions. If we look at all of those activity, this is for all of those activities. So the workshops, including the ones by University of California, the conference calls, the apprenticeships, and so on. So who's here? Well, we don't know. I mean, you can look at the group that's currently logged in. That's our first crop, but we won't know until the end of the week who has attended. We can tell you how many have pre-registered. 464 have pre-registered. By comparison, last year it was 334. Now, we have to take into account that the 464 is for both this week's workshop and the Becoming an Institutional CI Leader workshop in August. So this workshop has 380 pre-registrants, which is about normal, I guess, probably right around in the middle of what we'd have had over the last 10 years. And then, or the last 8 years anyway. And almost as many are registered for the August workshop, but of course we'll pick up some more as we move through July and into early August. There were 10 people who pre-registered but didn't mark which workshop they want, so we're just assuming they want both unless they tell us otherwise. In terms of institutions, we have 217 pre-registered. 198 of those are pre-registered for this workshop, and that includes 34 new institutions. Now, of course, not everybody who registers will actually show up, and based on past experience, not everybody who shows up bothers to register. So we have imperfect information, but we probably expect 2/3 of the number of people who pre-registered as the number of people who actually show up. Now, why is it hard to help researchers? Well, part of the answer is, and yes, the University of Edinburgh offers an online HPC master's and online HPC and data science master's, and there's a URL. So that may be the first of its kind, but again, well, not for HPC, but again, that's not for facilitation. It's for HPC as a topic. So yes, I agree there are degree programs in cyber infrastructure, but I'm not aware of any degree programs in cyber infrastructure professions. I think there may be one or two bachelor's degree or perhaps associate's degree programs in Linux system administration, or maybe more broadly, system administration somewhere in the US, and there may be a few elsewhere in the world, but it's quite rare. And that's not cyber infrastructure, that's just server or desktop scale. Okay, so why is it hard to help researchers? The problem is that the number of researchers who need our help is growing, and the average level of sophistication about research computing is falling for two reasons. One, more and more disciplines are doing computing intensive and data intensive research compared to the past, and that number continues to grow. But at the same time, within any given discipline, more and more researchers, a higher and higher fraction of the researchers within that discipline are doing computing and data intensive research than ever was the case in the past. So the audience for this, especially now with the rise of AI, especially in the context of large language models, the interest in this is off the charts. And of course, it's always a roller coaster, and eventually the interest will come back down and so on. But there's also that sort of general slope over time, and that has been continuing. So, 20 years ago, almost everybody we worked with, 25, 30 years ago, almost everybody we worked with in research computing was physical sciences, engineering, a little bit of math, not much computer science because the computer scientists weren't terribly interested in big computing. Um, so over time, we added life sciences and we added social sciences and we added humanities and arts and so on and so on. Um, but of course, as new disciplines are added, the fraction of them that have any sophistication about research computing in these new disciplines is much lower than in disciplines that have been using research computing for a long time. So they need more help to get started and to remain productive. All of that is coupled with the machines are always getting harder to use. And the reason the machines are getting harder to use um, really devolves down to the same psychological principles governing, for example, Las Vegas. You go to Las Vegas with a certain amount of money in your pocket and you come home with zero because they've figured out the exact psychology to get you to give up the money one way or another, right? If you're not throwing it away at the poker table, then you're paying for tickets for shows because the shows are fantastic, but they're quite expensive. So one way or another, you're coming home with an empty wallet. Um, the same sort of general principle applies to technology. The difficulty of using a technology is the exact right difficulty. That is, it's the exact amount of pain that we collectively are willing to tolerate in order to get the benefit of using that technology. And the vendors are very, very sophisticated in their understanding of how much pain we're willing to tolerate in exchange for productivity. So the two issues that govern cyber infrastructure, and in particular that govern high performance computing, are the storage hierarchy and parallelism. The storage hierarchy is getting deeper, right? So now we have high bandwidth memory coupled with our regular server RAM, coupled with cache and registers. And of course, the cache has at least three levels now. And then we've got various speeds of SSDs, so various levels there. Then we have spinning disk and ultimately tape. Uh, there's this enormous stack of storage technologies that you have to learn to navigate properly. But then the parallelism gets more hybrid. So now we have MPI, which is multi-server. We have OpenMP, which is multi-core within a server. And we have GPU parallelism, or more broadly, accelerator parallelism, because it could be things like field programmable gate arrays, or there's now IPUs and TPUs, and you name it. There's a zillion of these, right? And then finally, there's the conceptual distance. So the average human being thinks of this as a computer, their phone. To them, that's what a computer is, and their experience of computing is I pull out my phone. If I want to, let's say, install an app, I pull out my phone, I tap three times, once to open the store, once to select that app, and once to agree to let the app listen to my phone calls, right? Um, that's what it takes to use the machine. That's very different from what it takes to use a large scale advanced computing system, which typically is command line, Linux, batch, remote, shared. And the gap, the mental distance between those two things is enormous. Okay, now it turns out that most institutions have on-campus research computing. So I ran the numbers and I've identified 167 of the now 186 very high research activity institutions in the US under the Carnegie classification system. They just released a new one this year. 89% of them have on-campus research computing. And by the way, I've only been able to identify three so far that use commercial cloud as their primary or sole research computing offering. That is approximately unheard of. Not literally, but approximately. With R2s, high research activity institutions, 36% have on-campus research computing. And most institutions have been participating, most of these institutions have been participating in the virtual residency. So if you look at the R1s and R2s, 89% of R1s have participated in the virtual residency. Hopefully that number goes up a bit. 55% of R2s have. We did an evaluation several years ago. I guess it's 4 years ago now. It was based on the 2020 workshop. It was published in 2021 and was done by folks at, I think at the time were at Georgia Tech. They had started at University of Illinois. Doesn't matter. And that evaluation found that people loved the workshop. So the scores ranged from 3.9 to 4.4 on a 1 to 5 scale for all of the sessions. Here's the professional ecosystem. You can see there's lots of groups. Find the ones that align with your aspirations, your desires, your interests, and join them. Because the more you participate, the more you're going to learn, the deeper your talent stack will be, the more value you will bring, and therefore the more improvement you'll make in your own career. Okay, so this week's workshop, right? We're starting right now. We're right over here. And then, oops, that should have said 25. Then we move into the effective communication talk. There'll be a break because I have that meeting I have to go to, but the effective communication talk. And then in the afternoon, we've got CI user support and the CI landscape. Tomorrow, we'll start with facilitating AI. Then we'll have a lecture demonstration on intake interviews. This is where you have your very first encounter with a researcher you've never talked with before to learn about their research and their computing and how you can help. Then how to learn and how to teach research computing resources, and then a research networking overview. And by the way, so with these panels, the way these work, we just we invite the panelists, or they volunteer to be on the panel. We cook up some questions in advance so they have something so we don't have any dead air during the panel. There's always something to talk about, but those questions are not required. If they want to do something completely different, they're welcome to do that. Just keep the discussion lively because we find that doing talks at the intermediate level is very challenging because very few people hold the whole picture in their head. Whereas a panel, if you've got half a dozen people on a panel, then they can do a really good job of sharing the information that they have, but they don't have to know all of it, right? They only have to know their corner of that information. Okay. And then on Wednesday, we've got reducing barriers to entry for new users. Then the second part of intake interviews, this was a recommendation from one of the virtual residents several years ago, was going into the intake interview session with no real sense of how to do intake interviews is very challenging. So let's first do some training on how to do an intake interview. Then we'll do the practicum. So we'll do a little brief, like 15-minute introduction, but then we'll dive right into having intake interviews with researchers. And you can earn a badge in intake interviewing. And in fact, typically about 2/3 of the participants do earn the badge. You earn a badge on doing an intake interview. We have judges lined up who are going to judge everybody's ability to conduct intake interviews. If you don't want to, you don't have to. although it's free and you might as well because you're there anyway. But these will be with real researchers, and I actually have the problem this year of I have too many researchers, so we may have to ask some not to show, or we may send them away. But hopefully it'll all work out. Then in the afternoon, from Dirk Colbury's Cyber Ambassadors program, he's doing Let's Talk, communicating this problem. And I should add, he's also on Tuesday doing the lecture demonstration on how to do an intake interview. And then Wednesday afternoon, we've got a panel on research data management. On Thursday, we've got explaining complex technical topics to researchers. And then beyond the intake interview, building lasting collaborations with researchers, because the intake interview is just the first step, right? You don't just bring them in, do the intake interview, and then ignore them. You want to actually build a relationship with them that will pay off for them and for you over time. Then we have facilitating cloud computing and explaining cloud pros and cons, assessing and anticipating researcher needs. And finally, on Friday, which is a half day, because I figure nobody wants to stick around Friday afternoon. So we've got emerging technologies, and then we always wrap up with the traditional stories from the trenches. We'll sit around the virtual campfire and swap tales of tragedy and triumph in our experiences in research computing facilitation. So you can get a copy of the agenda, and thank you, Dirk, for putting the webpage in the chat. You can get a copy of the agenda off of that. We have 69 presenters from 58 institutions. I'm not going to read out all their names, but I want to thank all of them in advance. And almost all of these folks are volunteers in the sense that I didn't grab them by the hand and twist their arm. They said, "Oh, I'd be happy to do this." And so we have a really great group that we're getting ready to welcome starting this afternoon. How do we pick them? Some of you experienced this if you are already on our mailing list, that you got an email from usually from me, sometimes through the mailing list and sometimes individual, begging and pleading, would you please, please, please be a speaker or panelist or panel moderator? And I had to go through a certain amount of pain to get it all worked out, but we have a great group set up. I'm really excited about this. And the reason we do this is several years ago, we were doing one of these annual summer workshops, and we did a lot of recycling of the same panelists or speakers multiple times in multiple sessions the same week. And we got a number of complaints about that from the attendees that, as much as they appreciated those folks, they didn't want to hear from the same people over and over and over. So what are we here to accomplish? We want to learn how to work with researchers who are using cyber infrastructure, how to find them, how to recruit them, how to help them. Ultimately, we want to become institutional CI leaders and to start thinking about becoming national CI leaders. What are we not trying to do? We are not going to try and teach a lot of technical content. There is some, but that's not the bulk of the focus here. And there's a very simple reason why. There are others who are teaching technical content and doing a great job at it. If we teach technical content, or at least primarily technical content, then A, we're competing with people who are already doing a great job, and B, we're not adding a lot of value. So rather than do that, we are going to focus on the profession of CI facilitation, how to be a CI facilitator, what skills, and especially what professional, interpersonal, soft skills do you need in order to be effective at this work? And we're going to start that with our second session later this morning. Our hidden secret agenda, okay? The problem we're having is national and institutional CI leaders are aging out. Our hair is getting grayer and grayer, right? And I'm starting to include myself in this group because I'm not a spring chicken anymore. But we need to transition. We need to pull everybody, drag you all upstairs, kicking and screaming, and put you in charge. Because in the next few years, you're going to be the only person who's been around long enough to know how the joint runs. And so you're going to have to be in charge. It's not that we want to impose leadership on you, it's that we have no choice, right? We've got to do it because the leaders are retiring. And as they retire, we need new leaders to step up. And that's you all. Even if this is your first day, thinking about cyber infrastructure facilitation and cyber infrastructure professions in general, we're going to need you to be a leader. And it's not that many years away. There's more and more need for this kind of skilled workforce from beginning to end, the full pipeline, not just leadership. It's more and more need for this kind of capability, and not enough people who know how to do it or want to do it. My general philosophy, anybody dumb enough to show up gets put to work, right? And I include myself in that list. I have frequently been dumb enough to show up, and look what happened, right? Some of you already know how to do these things, but honestly, facilitation is not trivial. And if I add another layer of honesty to that, um, understanding how to do it when your background is in things instead of in people is doubly hard because it's largely a people business. It's got a things component, but it's a people business. So, yes, some people know how to do this, but a lot of us came in kind of flying blind, and we need a way to learn how to do this. So we're doing the best we can to teach it. We can't teach you how to do it in a week, but we can teach you to be ready to learn on your own as you have experiences during this week. Okay, now, um, I mentioned we have a grant proposal writing apprenticeship, a paper writing apprenticeship. Both of those are on hiatus right now, by the way, and a grant running apprenticeship, which is active. Um, and the reason we put the grant proposal writing apprenticeship on hiatus is because we got a grant. And this is the grant we got. And I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about it. So the cyber training grant we got, which is a pilot grant called a Professional Development and Certification Program for Cyber Infrastructure Facilitators. And here's the details of it. When we talk about professional development certification, we're talking about something morally equivalent to, say, a Red Hat certified engineer or a CISSP or what have you, but for cyber infrastructure facilitators. So what we mean is not an informal education, non-matriculated credential. Um, so the Certified Cyber Infrastructure Facilitator Training and Development, or CIFTED project, it's the first non-sponsored link on Google for that acronym. It is not the Canadian Centre for International Fisheries Training and Development, though I do like that we both end in training and development. That's kind of fun. They were number one before we got started. I feel a little bad for them. Again, non-matriculated, informal education. It's not a certificate of participation. There are exams. So you earn a collection of badges, and then you earn badges, then having specific collections of badges earns certification. So why aren't we doing degrees? Well, the problem is, and a couple of folks have put in the chat about degree programs in high performance computing, and those can certainly get you into the cyber infrastructure professions, but they are not cyber infrastructure professional training programs. They are programs about the topic of high performance computing or what have you. And that's incredibly important and valuable. But what we're trying to do is more specific than that. It's specifically CI professions, and in this case, CI facilitator profession. We expect there to be a few thousand CI facilitators. I mean, at the high end, maybe several thousand. That is not enough to justify creating a degree or a certificate program. Um, and so far, nobody has tried. To give you a counterexample, Several years ago, I think now it's about 15 years ago, Texas State Technical College, which is a two-year school, a community college, they set up a degree program in HPC system administration, and they called it High Performance Computing System Administration. Well, it crashed and burned, I suspect because nobody knows what high performance computing is, so how would they know they would want to get a degree in it? They then switched that to something cloud related. I don't remember the exact title. That also failed. I think they do now have an AI degree program, and that's probably doing really well, what with one thing and another in AI these days. So, but that sort of gives us the counterexample why we aren't creating degree programs or shouldn't expect them. All right, what are the objectives? Well, from the perspective of the facilitators, training and proof of mastery of the relevant skills, and cultivating and expanding the community, which this workshop, for example, plays a part in as well. From the perspective of research computing centers, increase the uptake of facilitation as a mechanism of increasing the uptake of research computing. And from the perspective of the researchers, increase their research productivity by applying research computing. So how do we do this? We determine what skills are necessary. So we've done some polling. For each of those skills, we develop a training mechanism, an exam, and a scoring rubric, and then we pilot test those. We construct certification pathways. So these are collections of badges that collectively get you the certification. We test these methods and we do an evaluation. We have an external evaluator. The challenges for certification, well, what skills do the facilitators need? How do they build credibility with their researchers and institutions? How do we train enough of them? How do we know that it works? And how can we sustain it beyond the initial period? What we aren't trying to do in the pilot project is multiple levels of certification, nor meeting the needs of industry. We don't have the resources for either of those. All right, so you can earn a badge this week by going to the intake interview practicum on Wednesday. This is the mid-morning session on Wednesday. And I really, really would like to get as many people as humanly possible in this because, as I mentioned before, we got a lot of researchers. I was panicking about getting enough researchers, so I invited a whole bunch. And far more of them said yes than the rate of yeses for everybody up to that point, which I was not expecting. So now we have like 20 of them or something. Usually we have like maybe 25. Usually we have like 12. So we got like twice as many as usual. So please do come and get yourself that badge and have the experience with the intake interviews. It's really great. It's a lot of fun. It moves very quickly because we do 3 researchers per facilitator in about an hour. So, and it's the badges are free. So, and you are next. We want you to be an institutional cyber infrastructure leader, and there are both good, warm-hearted, virtuous reasons and wicked, selfish, mercenary base reasons. And I personally believe that it is best when you have both the good reasons and the evil reasons. When you have both, then you are on the one hand motivated by whatever level of altruism you have, and on the other hand, you're motivated by whatever level of selfishness you have. And those are both good kinds of motivation. So here's the good reasons. You have great ideas, and you should be sharing them with the world. They're based on your experience, your observation. If you don't have them yet, you will, right, as you go through this career. You love helping researchers to use computing to improve their research, and the proof of that is you're interested in this job or already have it. You know that your administration needs help understanding research computing, and you're getting better and better at that. Now, the wicked selfish reasons, it pays better, and you have more job security because, let's be honest, anywhere you go in any human endeavor, the fraction of participants who are willing to be a grown-up, who are willing to take responsibility, take ownership, and not just, do their 9 to 5 and go home, but willing to take ownership, that fraction is always too low. So I be a national cyber infrastructure leader. Well, the good, warm-hearted, virtuous reasons. The national community could benefit from what you know that we don't. And you'll have a chance to influence the course of research history. And then, of course, the wicked, selfish, base, mercenary reason getting noticed by other national leaders will advance your career. You will have more opportunities if you are visible out there because people will say, oh, let's give this to Janet because Janet has been doing XYZ, so I'll bet she'd be great at ABC. So again, here is that CI professional ecosystem. Please join as many of these as are of interest to you. I hope it's more than just the virtual residency. Um, be part of the national community. That will also help in these various ways. You will learn useful things and exciting things will happen in your life. Um, we all suffer from imposter syndrome. I know I do, right? Every day I think to myself, what business do I have telling other people how to do their research computing? But then I remember a very interesting experience I had many, many, many years ago, sort of at the start of my professional career. A grad student came to me. This is like I was a postdoc at the time, so I had just graduated maybe a year before. A grad student came to me and wanted career advice. And I couldn't say no because I'm a nice guy and that seemed mean. Um, but I thought, what the heck do I know? Why would they come to me? I don't know anything. And I realized as I was having this conversation, this meeting with this grad student, I don't know hardly anything, but I do know more than they do. So I was able to be helpful. So you have to get past the I don't know everything. I know a few people who know everything or near enough to, but I know vanishingly few people who know everything. You don't have to know everything. An expert is 5 minutes ahead of everybody else. You need to know useful things that other people don't know. Then you're not an imposter, right? You don't have to be the world's foremost expert in order to be useful. But if you've got imposter syndrome, don't worry about it. That's normal. I've got it too. Okay. So how can you make your mark? I'm going to give you myself as an example, but there's two categories. Invent good things or make good things better. And for my own career, so I invented supercomputing in plain English, the One Oklahoma Cyber Infrastructure Initiative, including the Oklahoma Optical Initiative and the One Oklahoma Friction Free Network. I'm really good at naming stuff. The business model for our large scale tape archives, the virtual residency, including the various apprenticeships, becoming an institutional CI leader in August, the CI Leadership Academy, and of course, SIFTED, the certification program. In terms of making good things better, I contributed and helped to improve the National Computational Science Institute's parallel computing workshops, the SC Conference Series education program, the Campus Champions through joint leadership with Dana Brunson, who's now at Internet 2. I would say Dana did a lot more than I did, but I contributed. So um, you don't have to invent things. You can make good things better. Or if you're good at inventing things, you don't have to make good things better, or you can do both. We need. When I started my career, we joined the Coalition for Academic Scientific Computation, or CASC, which is mostly R1 universities, some national labs. There's a few R2s in there. um, when I joined, I believe there were about 35 members. Today, there's over 100. So it's pretty significant growth. But on the other hand, it's less than a third of all R1s and R2s. In fact, it's only about 60% of R1s, and not all the members are R1s. So it's probably more like half of the R1s. So there's still plenty of growth potential. And get ready to be in charge. So I'm Gen X, right? Um, my sisters are baby boomers. So you can tell we're on the boundary there. The baby boomers, every baby boomer is over 60. Um, and some Gen X are 60. So at or near retirement age. So we're losing more and more baby boomers every year to retirement. So you millennials, you may be thinking, well, that's a long way away from me. Yeah, maybe it is, but our need for you is not getting smaller, it's getting bigger, right? You're thinking Gen Z, I'm in college now, I'm an undergrad or grad student. How much use could you have for me? You'd be surprised, quite a lot. Who do you think is going to have to pick up the mantle that the gray heads are currently carrying? We're all going to be dragged kicking and screaming upstairs, and we got to be ready for it. And finally, this is the best job in the world because every single day you get to see how what you do makes a positive impact on the people you're helping. Okay, here's some papers acknowledging some grants, and I've got time for a few questions if there are any. Any questions? Okay, I have $1 in my pocket, and I will email that dollar or physically mail that dollar to whoever asks the first question. Here, I will make my dollar concrete so you know I'm not kidding.
Hey, Henry, just to
Jeremy, the
get the
dollar is waiting
conversation
for
started.
you.
Oh, what
Go ahead.
is the first organization that you think people should join if they're new to the community? What's the first mailing list, or first organization, first community, just to kind of help get them connected so that they can stay in the conversation in the days and weeks and months ahead?
Right. So honestly, I would encourage people to join three mailing lists that have significant overlap, and I wouldn't want to claim one or the other is more important. So all of you, by being foolish enough to sign up for this event, have been put on the virtual residency mailing list. So you don't actually have to sign up for that because I imposed it on you. You can always get removed if you don't like it, but um, you're already on that. I would recommend also joining the Campus Champions and the Campus Research Computing Consortium, or CARC, People Network. Those are, I think, the most valuable mailing lists for people in our business to be on, and the most valuable organizations to join. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. And
Okay,
I have to agree, all of those are great lists to be a part of.
great. Gregory, real quick, yes, that is an actual paper dollar. I don't generally carry a lot of silver on me. How can we retain talents in the university when industry is paying more? You can't. And I want you to flip your brain upside down and think of it the other way. The way you should think of it is you will have turnover. We are now retaining research computing facilitators for less than 2 years each. They come now. Sorry, I should be clear. We have a long-standing research computing facilitator, um, but we've also had substantial turnover in our facilitators. They come and then they go somewhere else. And my point of view on that is that's fine because we're a university, we're an academic institution. Among our jobs is creating the workforce of tomorrow. I got this point of view from John Towns, who is the principal investigator of Access, which is the umbrella over the NSF-funded National Supercomputing Centers. He said it used to bother him that all of his best people would get cherry-picked, and it stopped bothering him because he realized that that's what he's there for. That's what his institution is there for. And he does keep some of his best people. They do stay because they love the work, they love the institution. They're making a lot less than they could out there. They're not getting cherry picked because they're happy where they are. But if people are coming to us and working for us for a couple of years and then taking what they've learned and taking it to somewhere else that's going to advance their career, great, right? As academic institutions, we will never be able to pay people what they're worth in industry. So if they need the money, if they want the money, they absolutely should go get it. And we're 100% behind that. We're sad to lose them, of course. And yes, it's extra work because now we've got to do a whole hiring process again. That's my life now, right? We hire people. That's how it goes, right? We have two open positions right now, and we just filled two student positions. This is my life now. It's fine, right? But my opinion is this is what we're here to do. And I apologize. I'm going to have to wrap up now because I've got to go to my meeting. Thank you, everybody. We will reconvene at 11:15 Central Time, so an hour and a half from now, for effective communication. We look forward to seeing you there.